Okay, very good. Well, welcome everyone to our October 24th, 2022 Board of County Commissioner meeting, our strategic meeting at 9 o'clock. It is 9 o'clock and we're going to get started. Let the record reflect that all three commissions are present as well as our executive management team. Our CEO, Mr. Simmons, will be joining us here shortly. He is just trying to make his way through the construction up to the county from the city. So, but with that, I know we have lots of people in the room today. So, Mr. Crowder, I'll let you state your name and title for the record and your guests, and then I'll let you take over the presentation.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, County team. The airport staff is here today to present the 2023 budget. We have our CFO, Rob Schultz, and our Director of Marketing and Public Affairs, Todd Woodard, accompanying me this morning. The Airport Board has approved this budget, Madam Chair, and we are currently on the agenda this evening at the City Council meeting as well. Rob has a short presentation that we'll run through, if that's okay with you, and then we can answer any questions that the Commissioners may have regarding the budget.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. As you can see on the screen, as well as the printed copy in front of you, we're here to present the 2023 budget for Spokane airports. And if you could advance to the next slide for me, please. Thank you. So as you'll see, and the first point on this slide, I won't go through all the detail. Really, the first point is we're not here asking the county for any funds, requesting any funds. Just with the city, we have not requested any funds for this. The airport is financially self-sufficient. Funds come from essentially users of the system itself. I won't go through the detail there on the operating revenue. You can see some of the major drivers with the operating revenue there. On that middle part of that slide, you'll see the capital projects revenue. That's a little bit expanded from previous years. So there's some additional grant money that we have received that will go toward our capital project program that we have for 2023. And you'll see that a little bit later in the presentation. We'll go through that in just a little bit more detail a little bit later on. If you could advance to the next slide for me, please.
I'm sorry, you had me when you said you weren't requesting anything. I mean, I was all in.
So this is the budget process. I won't go through this in detail. Really what it is, really kind of 2 points here, and you'll see this on the next slide or two that we have, which is going to be, we look to the airlines to give us an idea of what in-plane passengers, landed weight are going to be. So we look to them for that consultation, try to get some information from them, but we also look at economic outlook and what that potentially could be. And one of the things that we've heard, as people are well aware, is the potential for a recession in 23. And so we wanted to do what you'll see here is really what our approach was for the 23 budget is not necessarily to drop the levels of employment, if you will, in 23, is really slow down the recovery of it. We're trending toward 2019 levels. Really what we decided to do is just slow that recovery down. Unknown on whether it's going to be a soft landing or a hard landing or how long it's going to be. So really the approach was to be a little conservative, just slow that recovery down for the airport in terms of our activity out there, both in terms of employments as well as landed weight. A little bit later on in the presentation, really one of the main points of this slide is really the rates that the airlines will pay. And we'll see that a little bit later in the presentation as we go through. If you could advance to the next slide for me, please. So this is just a summary of our activity. Passengers or in-plane passengers are on the right-hand side. Landed weight, which is essentially our aircraft that are landing at the airport, is on the right-hand side. Won't go through the detail on this. This is just a comparison for folks. But really, again, what it is really that slowdown of the recovery in 2023. So we still, what we're projecting for 23 is still be below 2019 levels by 3%. And again, that's just slowing that recovery down for us in terms of employments. We're still anticipating having a robust, healthy activity out there, just not quite to the 2019 or pre-pandemic levels that we had. In landed weight, just 1 point on there is change in aircraft mix on there. The number of seats that we have roughly available to what we had in 22, just a slight decrease for the passenger activity for the airlines. But our overall number for landed weight is going to be up, and that's because of cargo activity. So the introduction of the Amazon service, as well as UPS and FedEx, have increased that cargo. And so that's buoyed that total for landed weight just slightly on there. If you could go to the next slide for me, please. This is a little bit about our budget process and the highlights. And so we did consult with the airlines on October 4th. We have gone to the Spokane Airport Board as well as City Council previously. One thing to point on here is the rate summary on there. Right in the middle of that slide, there's two components that really are keys for us in terms of what the airlines are interested in, as well as some major revenue drivers for the airport. That's the terminal rent. So what we have for the 23 budget is $63.02 per square foot per year for that, and that's up from $60.70, about 3.8%. Landing fee increased from $2.16 to $2.24, about a 3.7% increase overall. So reasonable increases considering some of the inflationary impacts and supply chain challenges that we've had this year. If you can move to the next slide. That's a lot smaller on the screen than I realized, so I will just go through this on a high level. On here, on the left-hand side of that is the non-operating revenue. So those are restricted funds that the airport gets. So passenger facility charge, it's that ticket fee that users have. You have federal grants on there. Those are restricted for very specific uses for airport on there. On the right-hand side is our operating revenue and expenses. The information in green is our operating revenue. The information in red essentially is outgoing or operating expenses that we have. And as we start to kind of filter down on there, we do generate some operating cash on there. Some of that will go toward a matching component of federal grants. The other stuff will then go toward available cash, and that can be used either to help fund projects or to maintain operating reserves, which is really going to be key for us as we potentially enter the bond market in 2023 with issuance through the county for that. If we could advance to the next slide, please. And so won't go through all the detail on here. This is just a couple components. What you'll see is our operating revenues, expenses for 22. We're going to be up compared to budget in 2022 and below in operating expenses, which is a good place to be for us on there. That does impact a really key airport metric for us, which is CPE, which stands for cost per enplanement. That CPE is an industry-wide metric for airports, and having a below $6 CPE is a really good spot for us as we enter 2023 with our capital improvement program that we'll go over here in a few slides, as well as potentially entering the bond market in 23. You go to the next slide. Oh, thank you. So for 2023, we have consolidated operating revenues of just around $50 million. And that's up significantly from 2022. And one point to make on this, when you look at the percent increases both in revenue and expenses for the 22 budgeted expenses, one thing to keep in mind on that is just the unknown of what 22 was going to look like. So when we budgeted 22, we were still really kind of in the heart of pandemic. We were unsure of how the recovery was going to go and how that was going to look for revenue and expenses for us. So that's why you see some large increases for both the revenue and expenses on there. Really the bottom part of that slide is really where I wanted to concentrate. So we have a capital improvement program, CIP total of $123.6 million for 2023. That will be our largest in the airport's history on there. A good piece of that is our Concourse C terminal renovation and expansion program, or TREX, on there. So a couple of notes on there in terms of that grant. That $72 million, that $71.9 million you see there, that's a handful of grants that we have, as well as funding sources. Part of the Concourse C TREX program, that construction for that, some of that funding comes from that $71.9 million. So there is grant money embedded in that total, as well as 17.3 is what we anticipate that we may need for debt financing on there. So we wanted to list that component out. And then up to about $34.4 million of airport funds to pay for capital improvement program as well. So again, very large capital improvement program this year. Grant program really covers a lot of that in terms of some of the federal grants, as well as our passenger facility charge and customer facility charge funds that we have. You could go on to the next slide, please. And just one thing on operating expenses, just a couple things as you start to look at some of those numbers, especially when you saw on that slide, the previous slide, in terms of that percent increase. Couple of reasons for that. One is staffing levels. So because of the pandemic, staffing levels were reduced. We need to get back to that pre-pandemic staffing levels. Activity is nearly back, as you saw in some of the previous slides. And so staffing needs to get back closer to the pre-pandemic levels. And so we have that built into the 23 budget. And then the last two points on there, so supply chain challenges and increase in materials and supplies. That inflationary impact, we've taken that into account, as well as just some supply chain challenges and the impact on pricing for that. And then the last one, it is predicted to be a La Nina this year, so more snowfall, colder temps. And so we have built up the budget quite a bit and some of our de-icing, snow removal expenses that we've had at the airport. That's really going to be key for us as we move forward with this, is making sure that we have the runways, the taxiways, the roadways clear, so people can access as well as be able to continue the activity at the airport. Go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So this is just a little bit of a breakdown on the capital program by funding source. It just goes into a little bit more detail and lists some of the projects for funding sources. And so one of the ones you'll see in several different areas is the Concourse C-Trex program. And so that construction has already started. We had that groundbreaking ceremony last week for that. And that is a very large project for us, very important in terms of the viability of the airport long-term, adding capacity and flexibility for the airport. So we have multiple different funding sources for that. So you see the PFC PAYGO, pay-as-you-go funds, potential debt issuance that I mentioned before, and then the airport and federal grants. So the federal grants will cover a good portion of some of the Concourse C-Trex program, as well as terminal ramp construction that we have also in that vicinity, the expansion. So give us more overnight parking for aircraft on there. And in the airport category, that's really our cash funding that we have for that. So that's going to look at some of the roadway improvements, the parking lot improvements that continue to add capacity for parking as things continue to kind of stabilize with activity out there, as well as expanding some of our facilities, both in fuel and some of the ramp cargo area. If you move on to the next slide for me, please. And this is the final one. So this is our 2023 budget summary. You see the consolidated totals by our essentially cost center or business activity. So the airport, the business park, and Phelps Field. So we have a total budget for the year of $174,295,905. That encompasses both the operating expenses as well as capital. The capital, again, on the right-hand side, the 123.6. We have operating expense total of $50.7 million in total for the year. And again, just want to emphasize that we are not asking the county for any funds to fund any of the operating or capital as part of this program. That is the last slide. I'm happy to answer any questions or comments that people may have.
So one issue that I know that the airport has been challenged by is firefighting protection. And right now you have, I think, 12 firefighters on staff, but Local 29 wants to try and take that over and potentially increase the number of trained firefighters from 12 to a conversation I had with leadership to up to 40. And that cost then comes onto the airport. Is that a cost that gets passed on to the airline since it's airfield side, or is that a cost that we have to absorb here locally if in fact things should change next year and the board be more supportive of Local 29 than this board is?
Well, first of all, thanks for the question, Commissioner French. I think, as you point out, that's an independent decision that has to be made by the airport board as per the interlocal agreement.
Right.
And the airport board, right now, the position is we have the staffing coverage that we need, and that it would actually, there would be a number of different reasons why that concept would not be workable. We've had those conversations many years ago, and I don't think any of the facts have changed around that conversation. I think it would be detrimental to our relationship with the airlines. It would increase our costs unnecessarily. and not really necessarily increase safety as well. So I think that it is a concept that is flawed. And I think that it would be extraordinarily expensive. It would drive our cost per plane passenger up to levels that would be non-competitive. And therefore, I really don't see that that's a concept that works for us.
No, thank you. I know that the board has been very supportive of you and the leadership on the airport, and particularly as it relates to this issue, but many others. And so just kudos to you and your team. Just outstanding leadership. I mean, this is one of the best mid-size airports, and obviously with the best leadership in the country and stuff. So we are very lucky to have this team. So anyway, that's just one comment.
And I would just say congratulations on the groundbreaking for trucks. That's exciting. I mean, years in the making, right?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Years and delays and, getting back to it. So I just want to say congratulations. Sorry I couldn't be there, but, very excited for the airport and for our community to have that groundbreaking. So thank you.
Thank you. As Rob pointed out, it's a very strategic investment, and what I'm surprised he didn't point out, which I'm also proud to point out, not only are we financially self-sufficient, but right now we have zero debt. So that's also something we're very proud of, and obviously that gives us a lot of room to issue through the county additional debt to support the TREX project, but also have that debt at a very reasonable amount of debt service on an annualized basis. So that will continue to keep our costs competitive, which is something that we're always very focused on.
One of the other things that Larry has, Mr. Crowder has done at the airport is employee development. And we just recognized another employee last week that just got their college degree. And that's because of the support that Mr. Crowder and the airport provides. Can you talk a little bit about not only the advanced education for the employees, but also the certifications that you've mentored employees out at the airport, so that we've got some incredible employees developed by
Sure
Mr.
do.
Crowder.
We have an incredible team. And we have to be. We have to be really good at what we do. There's not a lot of us that have to execute the mission. And so having people that are at what I would call full performance level is very important across the organization. And as Commissioner French points out, we've had associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, certifications within the parking profession, certifications within the airport management professional programs that we offer, CPAs and others who have achieved their credentials. And I think, as I pointed out to the board last week, even more importantly, when all that's done, especially on the credentialing side, is continuing education requirements. So we have staff that are continually engaged with their education and getting out into the system in their peer groups and bringing all of that back to benefit the organization. So it is an incredible investment that pays back in a tremendous way for us by having people who can really function at a very high level. And very proud of our team and proud of everybody who takes the time to go through that process. In fact, both Rob and Todd have completed the American Association of Airport Executives Certified Member process, which is an intense amount of study over the history of airport management, all of the laws that apply, operations, planning, communications, engineering, entire gamut, including finance, Rob's strong point, and public affairs and marketing, Todd's strong point. It culminates in a written exam, and that is a very strenuous process and a rigorous process, but then commits them to continuing education within the airport management profession. So I'm very proud of them, proud of our team. I think we've had over 12 members of our team complete the certified member exam for AAAE. So just a small example, but thank you for asking about that and pointing that out, because it is critical to our success, and I'm very proud of everybody.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for presenting, and I believe it's on tomorrow's agenda for us.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I just want to say thank you to our county partners, to the commissioners for your great support, for the county management team for their support. We couldn't do it without you, and we really appreciate all of your help. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Thank you. Okay, next up we have Under Sheriff Kittlestead.
Madam Chair.
Thank you for being here. Thanks for the, it's just gonna be an off-schedule day, I can tell. So we'll go ahead and let you present.
Okay, so basically we're asking for approval on an interlocal agreement between the county and the city, specifically the sheriff's office and the police department. Some of the background is that we were notified by SPD and other sources that local patient transport services would no longer service us for patrol or investigations or anybody in transporting people that could not fit in a police vehicle to the jail. And so it got us into kind of a quandary when we have people that might be in a leg cast or have other medical issues that prevent them from riding in the back of a police squad car with a police shield in it. So we had to start looking kind of for options. And we signed that to our fleet manager, Mark Bissett. He found a government surplus vehicle on the federal vehicle surplus site for a very reasonable cost. It was a used vehicle. It had a wheelchair lift, and it's quite large in the back, so it's easy to get in and out of. And he was able to retrofit that at a very affordable rate. And so SPD was looking for this as well. And so the agreement we came up with was that we would do the initial purchase out of our some spare funds that we had in our fleet budget to the tune of about $11,000. And we got an almost new transport van that we'll share with them. They will handle the fuel costs and routine maintenance, oil changes, things like that, tires, whatnot. Any major, if the engine goes or transmission or something, obviously we would need to evaluate if it was worth fixing that, but we would share that collaboratively with the city. And that's all spelled out in here. There's also more specifics in here regarding if it's contaminated from a hazmat situation or someone's sick or whatever, we need to get it cleaned, or anything else like that, any damage that they incur, so even a collision or something like that, because there's identification. That's why it's here with you all. So in a nutshell, that's basically this has been an ongoing project, trying to get this with the city and have them sign it, but they signed it last week. I think we started this in July. So it kind of shows you how slow some things move, but that's what we're here for today for. So any questions I can answer, anything like that?
So as you look for these kind of vehicles, have you considered asking STA for their surplus vehicles? Because every year we give nonprofits and other governmental entities vehicles that we've surplus because they've exhausted their useful life to the agency and stuff. So
Yeah, I did not know that. I think our fleet manager might. I don't want to speak for him, but I'll definitely bring that up to him.
you might want to put that on your radar for next time. And, the taxpayers have already paid for the vehicle, so, transferring it over to the county or the city, should be an easy lift.
Well, and that's a good option for other services that we can provide, or even moving deputies or officers or whatnot. That's a good option. Thank you.
Okay.
And I just was gonna so in the agreement, if something happens, it's whoever's jurisdiction is driving the vehicle at that time is the one that takes care of the
Correct,
cost.
yes. If there's a collision or, whether they're fault or not, that entity will handle the repairs and ultimately potentially replacement if it was totaled, something like that. The only things we would ever share is, like I said, something that wasn't anybody's fault, the transmission blows up or the engine goes out, or any major repairs other than routine.
And how often do you guys need this? I mean, so if you're sharing it,
Yeah.
is it gonna get,
Well, I
And
can
it's
tell
so
you, we
much
haven't
use
had
that-
any since July, so
Okay.
that's good. When I worked patrol, it would come in waves where you had people that have a leg cast or a back brace and can't, those back seats are rather small. They're bigger than they used to be, but this at least gives us an option because, like I said, the patient transport services refused to take people to jail for us. So we had to find another way to get them there.
So Mike, the only cost to the county is $11,000?
Yes. And that was absorbed into some of our left unspent money from after we ordered vehicles this year.
Questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And then I see Tori.
Morning.
Good morning, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, considering that garbage.
You made it to work.
So this request is, and I'm not sure what you all have in front of you, but this request is for a replacement of our 32 radios in our education center that are 10 years old and not working, many of them. And so we did go through emergency communications, and this actually started back in May. So we just did get the bid September 20th. Otherwise, I would have this on my capital request, and I was a little shocked at the price, but that's not, I don't live in that world. So we were looking at some other options. One is could we lease? And then emergency communications said, no, you're gonna have to buy them. So that's.
So are they part of the, so I don't know that I have the request. So if you want to tell us how much and,
Sure.
pretend like we don't
Sorry.
have the information. in
I'm
front of
sorry, I
us.
thought we did. I thought that came over. The cost is, and this is pre-tax, $98,000 for 32 radios. And we have 19, soon to have 20 JCOs. We have 5 shift supervisors, medical, one goes down in the school, one goes with me out in administration. And then, of course, all the supplies that go with that. You have the radio, the earpieces, the microphones, the charging cases.
And then is that the same if you went through emergency management? Is it the same system that everybody else is using, the same radios?
Brings us current, yeah. It's the same ones that are at the jail, and I believe sheriff's also use this.
How does the jail, does the jail spend $3,000 a piece?
They lease.
At least. I believe they are surplus radios through Shrek. So that was going to be a question, Tori, is have you, when you say emergency communications, who are you referring to?
Shrek.
Shrek, okay.
And we tried for leasing, we tried for older equipment, and I'll tell you who said you're gonna have to buy them.
Okay.
It's one of the message that we got.
So I was going to suggest try and see if we could find a similar model to our detention services where they, if I understand correctly, they get surplus equipment through Shrek at probably some very nominal cost, which would be a lot more affordable. I don't know whether there's availability of those, but they routinely surplus radios out there.
Sure, and that's what we tried for. When
Okay.
I got the bid, and there's gotta be. So then when we reached out, and it was Gerald that we were talking to. And then, so we thought, we'll wait. And then, 'cause they stopped maintaining the radios we currently have in March 2023. We didn't get notice of that. You're having such problems. My detention guy gets on the website and sees this notice that that was actually out in 2018. But it was Gerald who said, you're going to have to make this purchase. They just don't have them.
I'd be happy for to reach out to Shrek and see if there's some opportunities, see what their cycle of surplusing radios are, and if we can try and find a way to avoid the $90,000 price tag.
Yeah, he said there's no need to wait, you're going to have to purchase. So they'll fix these and they'll work with us, until March, but he said there's parts problems with these, especially with the batteries, and now the communications, especially from the main floor to the basement, the downstairs where the school is garbled and just not clear. So we're open to whatever gets us communicating well.
Okay. But we'll have Scott check on that and report back to us next week.
Yep.
Just because I know if you need to get these replaced, and if it's an amendment to this year's budget versus next year's budget and all of that, then we need to be on it.
All right.
So, thank you. Good morning, Scott. How are you doing?
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Chesney. You were going to talk about amendments to the capital facilities plan.
We are. Thank you very much. We're here before you today to ask for the initiation of the formal amendment process for the capital facilities plan, which has two attendant pieces to it, Chapter 7 of the comprehensive plan and Spokane County Code 13650. All three pieces go together. We are ready for that initiation, chiefly as we've done the research to get ourselves more in compliant with what we've agreed to in the settlement agreement, which set a certain number of terms that had to be complied with in the CFP. And as you've heard recently, the Court of Appeals provided some direction on what they believe must be included in that capital facilities program. So with all of those pieces in mind, we're ready to move that initiation forward. We have a resolution prepared that would come to you next week for potential consideration the following week after that. And then we will be bringing recommendations to the Planning Commission, assuming, of course, you do go ahead and initiate. We will be bringing recommendations to the Planning Commission on the November 17th and anticipate bringing those recommendations to you on December 13th. So at this point, we're simply teeing it up for your direction back to us to go ahead and complete those amendments and bring them up for consideration.
Okay, so Mark, I'm going to look to you.
Yeah, it sounds like you're asking for a head nod on moving them forward, so it's actually a vote, right? I need to take a public hearing vote.
That would be in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks.
Yeah, thank you. I was just gonna, sorry, this is Jessica Pilgrim. Yeah, well, what you'll see is a resolution receiving the Planning Commission's findings and recommendation on just the initiation. So you don't need to vote today. It'll be in 2 weeks.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And you just want a head nod today, and then that will be coming forward to us? Just.
I think this is generally just to let you know.
Yeah, I apologize. Yes, it's just a briefing. No head nod needed.
Okay. Just making sure. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Mark. And a question for me, because the capital facilities plan, that Chapter 7 and they all go together. So if we're going to make any change to either one, then we've got to make sure that change happens in all of those three areas.
Because of the consistency of language and the fact that the amendments will change the terms of some of those various documents, we need them all to be in sync with each other.
Okay, very good. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, thank you. Yes, that's going to take us to Jeff and Erin again. Sounds like a comedy club. I know.
So want to start with kind of an overall where we are, as the funds don't last forever. We're down to about $4.5 million that are non-allocated, at least to a category of the full 101 million. And so as you look through this sheet, there's kind of a shorthand of where they went, just to jog your memory for awards that have been done. You'll notice the things in purple, because there'll be a total at the bottom. So you'll see like the community violence interventions, 1.11 on page 1 is in purple. It's not been awarded yet. If you look at 1.14, it's in purple because it's been awarded, but the full amount hasn't been awarded. You'll see you put 2.4 million in the blue column, but only 2.32 has been awarded. So there's about 76,000 left in that pot that we could either reopen for another round, or at some point you could pull that back and reallocate it somewhere else. So on the second.
As a side note on that one, any category that does have a remaining balance, if you choose to reallocate it to firms already awarded in that category, you do not have to go and rebid. So those are some of the nuances that as we get into 23 and 24 that you can think about.
So you'll see on page 2, the $12 million category 2.22, that will close this Friday. Everything else on this page, you will see the red comments on the side. The two categories that are on consent for tomorrow are assumed to have passed based on this document. We'll see if that assumption is correct tomorrow. And then on the final page, you'll see at the very top, there's the 10 million in the water sewer. And you'll remember that's our combo category. They can apply for anything 5.1 through 5.18. That will close this Friday. 5.20 is the 10 million that is still sitting there to be matches for some of the larger state and federal broadband grants we're going to. Then a 5.21, you'll see there's 400,000 left in that category, kind of like the other public health one. So at the bottom, you'll see 97 million of the 101 million is programmed. You've awarded, if tomorrow's consent passes, just shy of 56 million, two categories. And then those two categories that aren't fully used, and if you add the 10 million broadband, the 10 million water sewer, 5 million community violence, 12 million neighborhood features, that gives you that 37 million. You'll also notice per the federal agreement, there's the 10% indirects. So the red at the bottom, that is a very detailed estimation of the remaining indirects.
And that's to date. We'll be doing a reconciliation once we've kind of cleared out the remainders of the awards, because we accrue those indirects as the awards are made. So that will grow. Revenue replacement may or may not grow either, but that's revenue replacement as our current position.
And then Gary, I plugged 750 for an estimate on interest. Is that ballpark, you think?
It is. And from this point forward, the more we keep, the higher interest rate we should be earning. But
the slower you spend, the more you learn.
And interest is outside any of the ARP biosphere, for lack of a better word. It's truly county money.
And Arian, we have the third quarter report due next week.
We do, yes, and Gary will be certifying that as our executive. As a side note, a number of Washington entities have had audit findings because they did not have an executive certify it. So just want to say, I'm so glad for Gary.
Had to jump through about 1 million hoops to get certified for that.
Yep, so that will be happening tomorrow, a week ahead of time. So.
But anyways, I've heard from both the cities and from the county commissioners that the goal was to get this money on the street, and we're there, at least on the awarding phases. It's up to the organizations how quickly they actually spend. So any questions kind of on the overall picture before we move forward to tomorrow's resolutions? Seeing none. Tomorrow you'll see a resolution for tourism, hospitality, and travel, aid to those categories. And there are 5 awardees being recommended by the committee. 3 of them are at a full, being awarded the full ask of what they put in. One is Feast. It's a nonprofit in the downtown area. They serve a lot of the disproportionately impacted communities, which scores well in this category per the ARP rules. They also do a lot of help with small businesses, particularly multicultural, small restaurants that are opening up, training people both to work in those and helping them with business plans. So it's upgrades, expansion, renovations to their main facility at $390,000. Historic flight out at Phelps Field. They're wanting to bring the vintage aircraft weekends that have been in the Puget Sound over here. And they're huge tourist draws, bringing people from a 6-state, 2-province region. So very much in the tourism aspect of this category. They ask for $220,000. They had $100,000 in matching. And so the 220 is being recommended at the full. The Feast had $780,000 total cost, so their ask was 50% of the project. The Mac Museum is the other one that the committee's recommending to fully fund. Theirs was a $300,000 ask. primarily around, they were closed for a couple of years, a lot of economic disruption due to COVID, and anything that's tied directly to COVID disruption scores well per the ARP rules. So those three, the two that are not being recommended at fully funding, one is Visit Spokane. They had 5 separate requests. 2 of them are being recommended, and those are the ones around the Sports County USA designation, working to bring youth tournaments to the area, which of course is a huge economic driver. And then the other is having the county be as a partner, Expo 74, the World's Fair. Next year is the 50th anniversary. And so there's a lot of activities around that to try to create some economic activity, tourism. So those are the 2 categories that the committee is recommending to fund. The other Visit Spokane asks were very downtown centric, didn't have that kind of regional approach, and so they didn't score quite as high. So we're recommending $500,000 to Visit Spokane. Their total ask, if you accumulated everything together, was $700,000. And then the last one that scored well was the Spokane Valley Theater out in the valley. Their ask was $2 million. Our pot was $2 million. And so quite honestly, we're recommending they get the remainder. That's how that number came to. We kind of backed into it, which would give them $590,000. The Valley has put $4 million of ARP into that pot. They have 20-some million in other revenue, a lot of it private that has been funded. But this would be to their project out there and some operational. So that is the aid to travel tourism category.
One other thing is every one of the recommended firms also had in their allowances for youth and young adult discounts in order for students to participate in any and all of the program expansion. So an acknowledgement that that's something that they want to make sure is accounted for in any of these enhancements, which goes along with a lot of wanting to address what is going on with youth.
So that category, pass around some other papers here. The other category is on the agenda with blanks at this point, because this is a category that we would have recommended putting additional resources into, but we're no longer making those recommendations as the pots dwindle down. We don't have that big fund balance to say, why don't you just spend a little extra here? So we're going to present it as what we think would be the best fit. But of course, you guys are the decision makers, and you can either choose to expand the pot and do more, or trade some things out. So the only one that we're recommending at their full ask is Spokane Valley Partners. They're the wraparound service agency out in the valley, and they do everything from the region's only diaper bank, a huge food pantry for people, and then they also have 5 to 10 social service agencies that are co-located there. So SNAP is there if you need rental assistance. So it's kind of a one-stop shop, much like the downtown resource center that I think you've all toured. So 1.5 million of that ask is capital to their new facility, which the Valley ARP is also paying a large chunk of. And then 200,000 of that is operational to help over the next couple of years, 100,000 a year.
One other thing is they're the third in the line of the umbrella organization concepts that the commissioners have been underscoring, with Launch Northwest being the one for addressing economic disparities, AHANA for the insurance of multi-ethnic infusions. They really are the extension into outside the city core for those oversights. So they're an extension of Second Harvest, an extension of the Resource Center, which we really see takes that umbrella out to the city of Spokane Valley and that part of the unincorporated area. So continuing with them is one of those umbrella organizations.
So now I'll just go down the list from top to bottom with the ones that we're not recommending at the full ask. The Women and Children Free Restaurant, Free Kitchen. That is a group that's both a micro business incubator, kind of like Feast, where they help particularly small restaurants get up and going, but again, also train people in that sector. They're also the group that provided the COVID meals to our isolation quarantine locations during the pandemic. So that one, they had asked for just shy of $735,000. Some of that included some ongoing costs, which we shy away from, try to keep it at one-time costs. And so we're recommending $200,000. Share with you.
Absolutely.
And so recommending $200,000 towards that project, which would help them do some kitchen remodels and upgrades, increase their capacity. Next.
Jeff, I have a
Yes.
question. Didn't we do a lot of CARES dollars too? Was that one of the agencies that we did CARES dollars to?
I don't have the answer to that.
We did, and we did the initial remodel for like a large walk-in freezer, refrigerator. And according to Heather Arnold in our grants administration, she said they were stellar. What we found is, yeah, they were.
No, but I was just making
Exactly.
sure.
Yeah.
We did help provide
Yes.
CARES
Yes.
dollars to help,
Correct.
beef up the kitchen and get some new equipment and stuff then too,
So this is kind of, I forgot that point. This is piggybacking on a considerable amount of CARES dollars that they've already received from the county.
I think some of it is they've actually been able to, through the isolation and quarantine contract, through additional micro business investments, this is a little bit of an extension, not only in their footprint, but their programming because of that initial investment.
Yeah, now which they're a great organization, so now this is.
Neat to see. Thank you, Commissioner.
So the next one on the list is Spokane Workforce Council. We've heard a lot of testimony around childcare and the need for that. Just by way of reminder of CARES dollars, you guys, the board, gave $3.2 million to childcare of CARES money. And this is recommending another $2 million. So that would take you up to a total investment of $5.2 million in the childcare arena. They requested $3 million, but a big chunk of it, again, was ongoing staffing. And so we're essentially fully funding the portion of their request that was towards the child care vouchers, for lack of a better word. We'll talk about the part in parentheses a little bit later.
And back to the public testimony, as you well know, there were weeks where we had dozens of folks. We understood the underlying tenor of employees need childcare to work, and that all of the stories where I didn't have anywhere to go or expendable money to do that. So in this proposal, it is actually getting those funds to the workers so that they can go to their jobs or that they can do those things. And that really seemed to meet the need of the testimony that we had heard for, as you know, many, many weeks.
It was definitely the most kid-friendly, direct proposal to get the money, to have the money follow the kids, so to speak, as we hear in education sometimes. We've already talked Spokane Valley Partners. Project ID, that's not a typo, they do it as lowercase. That they work with the intellectually disabled community, and it's everything from helping them socially, but it's also helping them economically, helping them find jobs, finding a good fit for their abilities. And so they had requested $200,000, we're recommending $100,000. As another group of Money Grew on Trees, we would have loved to fully fund, but just the realities of budgets. But just they had a great application and certainly a group that is disproportionately impacted. And so there's that recommendation there. The last one is Frame Your Future. And this is a group that works with high school students looking to go into the trades. And of course, we need more people in the trades and we need more houses. We have a housing shortage in our community. So this is hitting both sides of that equation, both getting those who are interested in these careers a leg up in high school, as well as hopefully increasing our housing industry on the other side. Frame Your Future is under the Spokane Home Builders. They also work with the Association of General Contractors and with WorkSource again, because WorkSource provides the navigators. So if you're a student who's gone through the 2-year program, when you graduate, then they can hand you off to WorkSource. Going through the apprenticeship program or the apprenticeship process can be quite challenging. If maybe if your parents have gone through it and they can help you, that's great. If you're new to the apprenticeship world, I've been told it can be a little challenging and daunting. So this is, that's the work source portion to help people go from what they've learned in school to actually getting the job. The AGC, the general contractor portion, as they provide the curriculum and some of the funding also. So this one, they requested 1.47 million. And again, because of budget constraints, we're recommending $1 million. That keeps us under we had 5 million in this pot to work with. We're recommending $1 million. 800,000 of it would go to the student component where they're working in the high schools. The other 200,000, follow the arrow up to WorkSource, would be to help with the WorkSource component on the job finding side. So it's $1 million to the concept, but split between those two entities. And if everybody is good with those, we will fill in the numbers of the resolution for tomorrow. And if not, discussion.
I think, with the fact that we're getting so low on dollars and we're not wanting to expand, I'm good with both those, the tourism, hospitality one and that one.
I'm comfortable with this.
So, sounds like consent tomorrow is ready.
We have one other RFP that closed for community violence interventions at the same time. That one, the committee is undergoing some additional discussions with the groups that we're scoring. So that one will be prepped for your consideration next week. So that, along with the two Jeff mentioned in infrastructure and neighborhood features, will be on the docket for next week. To round out our ARP update, just wanted to let you know we've been working with Tony De Niro. We have had a few public records requests come in, so we are compiling those for responses. I do want to thank you for the ability to use CLA and the process, because that has actually made some what could have been robust PRR responses actually go quite smoothly, and shows how we did our scoring, the transparency of our scoring and award. So just wanted to let you know that we've had a couple of those come in today.
Madam Chair. So what's been the nature of the PRRs?
Primarily, it has been who responded and how did you score? And so the who responded obviously was not public information and had to go through the PRR. So as that's being requested, we're sharing those responses. But how it was scored was public. That was part of our posted RFP. So we're just including that as part of our response, so that was listed at present.
Okay, great, thank you.
We've had some of the infrastructure categories had PRRs, the nonprofit, which we had by far our largest application response. Certainly been some interest from those groups also on, and some of them are just groups wanting kind of that postmortem. What could have we done to do better, especially if they're looking possibly to apply again in a future opportunity.
Thank you.
Moving on quickly to broadband, I do have a couple items that I'll need to ask for direction from you on that, if that's all right if we go ahead. Thank you, Madam Chair. We had our broadband action team meeting last week. It was very informative. We had the update from Airway Heights through the representative from NOAANet on their curve study, which differed quite a bit from ours, which had to do with infrastructure expansion in I would say very rural towns and cities, where Airway Heights curb study, although they technically met the rural criteria, had to do more with almost a growth management economic development expansion, taking residential and small scale growth that's happening along their main corridor and working on a broadband plan to actually pivot that so that it moves to more of what we would consider a residential or suburban area, so that they could then have the access and capacity inside that urban core along Highway 2 for future economic development. So it was really kind of a fascinating spin on a curb development study. I'll be passing that on to you, but I thought it was very interesting. In addition to that, we were made aware from WSU, who has been formally tasked by the Washington State Broadband Office to artifact in a real formal way the broadband action team presence throughout the state, along with the concept of the digital navigator. We learned that every broadband action team that's in existence could ask for $20,000 of planning funds outright from the WSU extension. I asked if the group representing the broadband team was interested, and they said absolutely. And so I wanted your permission to go ahead and formally ask WSU for our seed money for planning. That could be very quickly accompanied by upwards of $150,000 to $200,000 of execution money afterwards. So we'll be the first broadband team to actually ask for this, so we can help sculpt the future. So my first request is your permission to request that funding.
So Mark, do I need to open it up for make a motion, or, I mean, it's just requesting the funding, and then we would sign the letter asking for the.
Yeah, you're gonna do this later, you're gonna actually take action later, right, to sign the letter? You can do it then.
It is under the $50,000 threshold, so from a budgetary standpoint, it could be signed by Scott or another, but I'm happy to bring it back in consent if you would like that officially in consent. That can be decided later if you want.
I would say at this point, just bring it back under consent.
Okay.
Or do you think just let's go?
I was just gonna say, let Scott deal with it, and then that way it's just one less thing we've got to deal with.
Because I have a bigger one that will need to come back. But wait, there's more. We also found out, I'm not exactly sure how or why, but the broadband office has offered they will step in and fund the entire match required from the federal government notice of funding for the mid-mile that we did in conjunction with NOAANET. What that means is we can formally apply to the Washington State Broadband Office to fund our $3 million match instead of using our local ARP broadband match and save that for later. So that is another one I'd like your permission to go ahead and pursue through a request from Washington State Broadband to consider our match as one of the subrecipients for that federal grant.
I think you'd want to pursue that.
No downside.
So question for you
Exactly.
though with NOAANET on, because they've already applied for the funds. Where are we in that process?
So Chris Walker from NOAANET said that if we receive word at Christmas, it would be a Christmas present. He's thinking that we would not hear anything from the federal government at least until Q1 of 2023. So how this technically rolls out is we apply for the match for our scope, but NOAANET and Petrichor as the open access operator would also be on that ask because it would have to match how the submission to the federal government goes. So I'll be working with Heather on that, but that's how that $3 million rolls out. And if we are funded completely up to that match, then Washington State Broadband Office would release the match money.
Okay, and that was a 25% match
Yes,
on that.
yes.
grant.
So it
So,
really saves
yeah.
the county's allocation on that.
Okay, great.
I will work with Heather on that. That was a fun announcement. Lastly, there is a meeting with Mark Biscani, the director of the broadband office, this coming Friday. I don't really have details on the agenda, but it seems to be a precursor to the release to the notice of funding opportunity for round 2 that we've been waiting. So I'm surmising that he would probably be articulating what the conditions are if they differ at all from the round 1 funding, but I won't know until Friday.
And do you know who's all invited to that meeting?
So the announcement said all 120 round 1 applicants were invited along with any respondent of the round 2 survey. So it is quite a large group.
Okay, and it's just going to be a Zoom.
And it's a Zoom. Lastly, much thanks to Mark McLean, Jim Amacio, and Scott. We are definitely tightening up the framework of the Public Development Authority to bring with you probably what would you say, Scott, November-ish? November-ish. We are learning a lot and have had some great conversations with Kyle and his staff on that as we enter in this new space and we start negotiating our franchise agreements with the different operators, that they're really apples and oranges right now because the franchise agreements are the right-of-way access only. But as we're learning, as we add some oranges to this fruit salad, that now there's space for asset ownership and open access management. And that really helps us understand how to work in both of those spaces together to make sure that the county stays as that overarching entity for the development and usage and optimization. So a lot of thanks to the public works staff to learning about that. And that's the summary.
Okay. Any other questions? Nope.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lots today. Appreciate all the hard work you guys are doing. I know it's been busy. Okay, that's going to take us to Matt Zarenfar.
Well, good morning. I think Ron has a presentation we can watch as we go. A few different things today. We have an encroachment agreement with Northwest Pipeline. We have a survey monument policy, and then we have a whopping 10 traffic code revisions, about half of which are related to Bigelow Gulch. So first one, this is the back side of 5 Mile. The geology there kind of lends itself to springs, and we have another one pop up that we're going to need to contend with. You can see from the pictures here, it's jumping the curb and flowing out into the road. And it's one thing in the summertime, but with winter approaching, it's going to likely start creating a bunch of ice and traffic hazards. So we want to get ahead of it. Part of this is the next slide, please. At the intersection there, and that spring occurs in that landscaped area kind of in the bottom of the picture there. It appears that the spring is following Northwest gas pipeline down the hill. It kind of runs straight down the hill, and it seems to be collecting groundwater, and then it surfaces here for whatever reason. So we're going to need to get in and around that high pressure gas main to kind of create a system for collecting up that water and getting it into our catch basin system in the intersection. So this is really the encroachment agreement to have permission from Northwest Gas Pipeline to do that work. And then we'll put it in a gallery system, and this will hopefully take care of that issue so we don't have to fight it all winter with our maintenance crews. So that's that one. Any questions on that? Okay. And there'll be more to come on that. We'll probably need an easement from the homeowners that we'll be cleaning up with and following up after they do the construction. You kind of got to develop them as you go. You end up kind of chasing these springs, so we don't exactly know the easement area we're going to want until we get done doing the work. Next one is a survey monument preservation policy. And a lot of words here, but I'll kind of summarize for you. Basically, these survey monuments are public domain belonging to the state of Washington. The WACs and the RCWs require that we manage and protect those. They are a big part of how they establish property lines, so you can imagine that's very important. We need to protect them from being damaged with our work or with other work. And the county and myself in my position are actually responsible for that. Next slide. CRAB has authority over that, and they recently adopted in the past year a requirement that we have to have a written policy. That's why I'm here. And in addition, it's just kind of outlines what we need to do, but that really hasn't changed. Our policy's been the same. This just requires that we adopt a written one. They provided a template and asked that we have that adopted by the end of the year, so that's why we're here now. Next slide. So the policy itself, it's, just kind of gives a general outlining of how we do that work and why. And again, we're already performing this work and have been for many years now. This is just the formal adoption of it to meet the CRAB requirement. Any questions on that one? Okay. Next slide. All right, on to traffic code revisions. Next slide. So the first one here is really cleanup. This is the intersection of Argonne and Bigelow Gulch. I'm sure most of you are familiar with that. And it's currently posted 35 mile an hour. This is just the code revision to formalize that. It's been posted that way for years. We're just cleaning up the actual county code Next slide. This is directly west of that intersection where last year's project went on. We made significant improvements to the roadway, and this section was 35 miles an hour. But with the completion of the previous project, it's pretty clearly needs to be a higher speed limit. When you drive at 35, it seems uncomfortably slow. And frankly, when we do speed studies, people are driving at more like 50, 55. So it's one of those, we want it to be closer to the reality of what people drive it at. Next slide. This is up by our old corral. This is just some stop sign revisions. We currently have Mayfair and Farwell as a four-way stop, including the approach into the old corral site. And this is making Farwell a through movement. It doesn't really need to stop at this time. Traffic volumes are low. So we're stopping Mayfair, we're stopping Addison. Addison already has a stop sign. This is just codifying that stop sign. So a little bit of cleanup and a little bit of revision. We can anticipate more changes are likely to come as that site develops, but until the site actually develops, we don't need those other revisions in place, and that'll be a dialogue with the developer on how that all takes place. Next slide. Back to another Bigelow one. This is the Forker Bigelow Gulch intersection, and as you know, there's some tight maneuvers that you have to make as you enter and exit that interchange. And this is just codifying the 25 mile an hour that we feel is appropriate for those movements. Next slide.
Can I ask can you click back on that one? Matt, when somebody is headed north on Forker and they take the right exit there and then they approach that T, does there need to be a stop sign there, do you think, before they then make the left if they were? I mean, because when you're coming south on Forker and you come to that little T intersection, does there need to be some sort of traffic control there, like a stop sign?
Yeah, let me look at it. Is it a yield right now? Is that right? It feels like
I came through there a couple weeks ago and I didn't. I was coming from the north, so I don't know. I don't know if you're headed north, what you'd see there. I'm not sure if there's anything there or not.
Let me talk to our traffic engineer and see what it currently has for intersection control, and we'll take a look at that and see what's appropriate there.
All right.
Okay, next slide. And this is some cleanup. We created a couple of stub roads with the current Bigelow Gulch project and with the one from several years ago. And this is codifying and reducing the speed limit on those little dead end stub roads. You can see we have Forker north of Progress and we have Progress north of Crown that don't go through anymore. And it doesn't really make sense to have those dead end stubs 35. So just codifying the reduction to 25 miles an hour. Next slide. And this is this year's project, and we're just raising the speed limit to what we anticipate the needed speed limit of 30 or 45 miles an hour to be. So codifying that change, and that'll obviously be completed in the very near future here. All right, next one. This is out at Liberty Lake. If you're familiar with this intersection, this is heading out to our county park, Lakeside and Neeland. We have one of these big Y intersections. And on that northbound leg of Neeland, you do not really have good visibility from the lakeside traffic that could be overtaking you. So this is stopping Neeland for Lakeside just to make sure people are stopping and looking back and not having a conflict at that intersection.
You had lots of comments from people.
Yes, they would like us to do all kinds of things out there, and we would love to if letting grow on trees, but that's a tough one.
Okay.
But we'll continue to talk to people, and Zephyr's going to get rebuilt with that Parks project in coming years. And we'll keep looking at it. It's, as you know, if you've driven that road, it's basically a side cast hillside road with no right of way, a bunch of vertical and horizontal alignment issues, but it is also a local access road. And with the exception of county park traffic, very low ADTs. So hard one to find a huge chunk of money that it would take to clean that one up. But we'll continue to look at it a piece at a time. If there's little improvements we can make and maybe some portions that might need roadside, clear side safety issues, guardrail, that sort of thing, we'll continue to look at that and make improvements where we deem them necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, next slide. Okay, this is really the result of a development project. The developer, Bud Morrison, realigned and created the new section of Barker, big nice arterial if you've driven it. Rodeo Drive, the new name for Barker out there. We just have to codify it and reduce the speed limit to 35 miles an hour. It currently is posted. This is really just cleanup. Next slide. In that same area, this is Timber Lane is the name of the subdivision here. We have a couple of roads that we want to put stop signs on, the intersections. There's really just, people are moving through too quickly. This is really just an effort to slow them down since it is a neighborhood. And some of there's a certain couple of intersections where the sight distance has become limited because houses are close and the fences are close. So really just trying to keep it safe for people. And we put the stop signs where we have flatter legs coming into the intersection, just easier for them to stop.
And this photo's older because this is fully developed.
Yeah, our aerials do fall behind a little bit actual development. They're a phase or two past this by now. Okay, next slide. All right, last but not least, this is Stoneman. And currently currently the speed limit's 45, increasing to 45 just east of Fairview there, right before we have some 25-mile-an-hour advisory signs, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So we're going to move that speed limit reduction past the two curves, or increase in speed limit past the two curves. So you'll go through the two curves, then the speed limit will increase to 45. Just makes a little more sense. And we've had some complaints about that and a few run off the road accidents that we hope that might help with. And that is all. Any questions on the traffic code revisions?
So there was a story in the paper this morning with regard to Bruce and down Spokane Road and stuff. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and what your perspective is on that?
Yeah, and I'll talk a little more generally too on Green Bluff in general. I mean, we all know, right? October in Green Bluff is very, very busy. It's challenging to get in and out on the weekends in particular. And it's always been a sore spot, both with the people that live there year round and the businesses would like it to be better. That intersection in particular, it works really well 11 and a half months of the year. But that half a month where people aren't familiar with the intersection and the traffic is so heavy and people get impatient, it's a challenge. So we're looking at it. Long term, I think we could apply for a safety grant and potentially get a roundabout or something in there. We could stop all the legs. It would be safer, unquestionably, but it would really slow people down too. So, and honestly, sometimes people miss the stop signs and those accidents are the worst yet. So we're looking at it. We'll continue to look at it. Bigger picture, Green Bluff in general, you know, I was wanting to reach out after October here when things calm down a little bit and go meet with the Green Bluff organization that has their consortium and talk to them a little bit about the issues and what they would like to see up there. From my perspective, it's like anytime we have somebody that has an event that causes a lot of traffic issues, it would probably make sense for them to get an event permit and provide traffic control and pay for that in some kind of organized way, since they all might have a share of that. But we'll talk to them and see what their temperature is for all of that. It's really making their customer experience better is what that would be about. It doesn't seem appropriate the county would provide that, really can't, you know. So, but talking to them about what they would like to see go on up there.
Yeah, my reaction, having been very familiar with that, was that it's a very limited, once in a year event and stuff, and so, anyway, thank you.
Yeah, they're an important part of our community. Everybody loves Green Bluff and going up there in the fall, and we'd like to make it the best experience possible if we can do anything on our end. And it feels really feasible. I know some of them, it mentioned in that article that they're making people make reservations, some of the bigger growers and some of the bigger events, and that makes a lot of sense, right? Kind of stagger it out like you see people do. But if there's something we can do to help through an event permit, through coordination of that effort, we're happy to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any data that shows that there's been accident? I haven't read the article. I'm not familiar with the article, but do we have any accident data?
It's not huge. We looked at this before this weekend because we were receiving complaints and we pulled the accident history and it was very minimal. So it's kind of a one-off, unfortunately, and I mean, nobody wants to see anybody get hurt at these intersections. And it is high speed. I believe it's 45 there. So it's, you know, when you have somebody pull out thinking the other person's going to stop, it's a bad accident. And we'll look at it. We can make it an always stop. It's just then everybody's spending more time.
Then you got 11 and a half months where people are upset instead of happy. So,
It is tough. It is a handful of weekends, and it's hard to make decisions based on that. Okay. All right.
Thank you very much, I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Have a good day.
You too. Is Kathleen? So we need to, she in the panel side. Okay. Justin. Okay, good morning, Kathleen and Justin. I see both of you there on the screen. Thank you for joining us for, we've been behind and now we're just 5 minutes ahead. So we will go ahead and have you guys get started.
Great. Thank you, Commissioners and Madam Chair. The Community Services Department wanted to bring forward a couple of programs. One is a phase 2 of a program and the other one is a new program to your attention, because with your approval, we will be bringing contracts forward to your docket on November 29th on these 2 programs. So we wanted to give you a briefing and give you an opportunity to ask any questions you might have for us. So the first program that we wanted to discuss is the what we call the HOST program, or the Homeless Outreach Stabilization Transition Program. And again, this is through a contract through the Healthcare Authority, through their funding, and it is to our Behavioral Health Administrative Services Organization division. I know that's kind of confusing because it's on homelessness, but it is not on the HCD division. It is through our ASO division. So we wanted to bring it forward for your review of, in regards to what it is. It will provide integrated health services through a multidisciplinary outreach team in Spokane County. And contrary to the memo, we are not asking for approval to procure and contract for it. We've already done the RFP and completed it on September 9th. And Friendship Behavioral Health was selected awardee for that RFP. So we're just looking for approval to bring the contract forward for you. Before going any further, what I'd like to do is have Justin speak to the program, because he is the administrator over this program for that division, and he led the RFP and can give you a brief overview and take any questions you might have about this program. So Justin, go ahead.
Thank you, and good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. The HOST program, just a brief overview, is a designated multidisciplinary team that does outreach based out of Senate Bill 5476, which was the Blake bill. So this is the second part of that bill. The Recovery Navigator program is already in effect, which is the first part of that bill. In Spokane County, that's through Pioneer Human Services. We presented on this last year. The state gave additional funding to create a team to do outreach and engagement in the community to assist individuals to bring them in from homelessness and into long-term behavioral health support if that's what they choose or need. And it provides wraparound care, including medical care. It includes substance use treatment and behavioral health services, so mental health. The goal there is to treat individuals regardless of healthcare coverage, meaning that they don't need to have insurance, or if they do, they're still going to treat them. This is specific to Spokane County only. The funds are only sufficient enough to cover one county. And so the team would be present in Spokane County with about a 6-member team providing those services, including an ARNP for medication support. So that's kind of a brief overview of the program. Any questions?
So I guess, are you going to go to the next slide that shows kind of who the team is? And
yeah, this is a quick breakdown. The team has not been yet fully vetted. We're waiting on that final contract to be presented before the board there. But essentially, this is what we've anticipated would be the breakout of the team based on the funding that's available and the model that the state's helping to push forward.
And with this, Justin, so they're anticipating, you and I have kind of talked about this a little bit, so I just want to make sure I'm clear, that this team would go out, into the streets and and look for people that need help, or, if law enforcement calls and said, we need help, can you, deploy this team? That's kind of part of what it's for. But can they also go into shelters?
Yes, the goal of this team is to go anywhere in the community where individuals need assistance. A part of the funding that we're hoping will also be provided by the state is to potentially secure a vehicle so that they could actually do a transport for this team out in the community, which would then provide, basic necessities, which can include food care, basic health and wellness care, so hygiene, and then also connect them in a warm handoff to existing resources, including CHAS, Friendship Behavioral Health, or any other provider that the individual needs, including community resources like housing support.
Great. And how many counties across the state are doing this? Or we're kind of a pilot for them? Or
Yes, and that's a great question. So the state was hoping to push this out in every region throughout the state. And currently there's 2 other counties that are doing this primarily, one in Olympia and one in King County. Spokane was selected as one of the regions that they identified would need this. And we did express our need and desire for this. So we were secured this specific funding for this team. So we are the 3rd iteration. The other 2 we're using as examples to implement, taking all the best, leaving all the worst.
And the hope for this team is to actually go out to the area, provide the service to the individual that needs it, so they don't end up in our emergency rooms taking up space there. Is that correct?
Yes, really, we're looking at a continuum of care. We've got co-responder teams that work with law enforcement. We have the stabilization center that law enforcement is engaged and want to divert from going into a incarcerated setting. We wanted to go upstream even further and say, can we prevent even engagement with law enforcement? Or if a law enforcement officer or EMS wanted to reach out and say, hey, we don't want to see this person again, but they haven't really done anything that would require us to take them to the stabilization. Can you see them? This team would respond immediately in the field, diverting any other further engagement with EMS and law enforcement that's unnecessary, and again, provide that immediate support back into available resources.
Very good, thank you. Any other questions for Justin?
You hit them all? All the ones I had.
Well, I'm just really excited because I think this shows that Spokane County is leading in amongst the state and really trying to work with the homeless community and try to help them get the help that they need and that they want. And so to me, this is just one more program showing, how we are providing those services. Yes, we're contracting those services with another provider, but it's Spokane County that is the one that's leading the efforts here. And so I think as people think that the county isn't doing anything on homelessness, we are actually doing a lot. And this is just another program that we've got to try to help our citizens.
Exactly. And one other thing of note I would add is, I know you had expressed concern, Commissioner Cooney, about a lot of other programs out in the community doing similar things. How are they not going to overlap? And we put it as part of the contract that the agency that is selected would be required to engage and collaborate with those existing resources so that there isn't duplication, but a further enhancement of the continuum of care and response.
Thank you. I appreciate that because I know as we talked about, prior to this meeting that, the health district is doing, I think CHAS goes out and does some, right. I think WSU is doing some. And so it's important that we really are coordinating and understand that there's a lot of people out there really wanting to help. And so thank you for putting that in the contract.
Excellent.
Next question.
Oh, Mr. French.
Yeah, so I noticed that in the language here and stuff, you're talking about stabilization. And so how does this pilot project incorporate with our mental health stabilization facility that we have here on the campus? Can you talk a little bit about that coordination effort?
Yes, of course. So stabilization in the world of behavioral health is 2 components. There is the inpatient stabilization with SRSC provides, which is a medical necessity criteria. They have to meet a certain level for it to be billed out to commercial insurance, Medicaid. And then there's stabilization, which is to allow for individuals to remain in the community or where they're at. So this is primarily with that program. We don't want them to have to go to the SRSC because it's a higher level of care. There's more involvement. However, if an individual is transitioning from the stabilization center to the community, we don't really have a really strong, robust way for them to transition back without having to be have re-involvement with law enforcement. So this team can support those transitions from warm handoff. SRAC says, hey, this guy's done. He's going to the community, but there's not a lot of support there. Can you follow up? This team goes out, meets him in his home or in the community, provides that additional support. So again, reducing unnecessary involvement with law enforcement and EMS.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I think it's going to be exciting to see the metrics and how you're measuring this, once the contract gets started.
Yes, that's always a fun aspect.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you for that one. I think you've got one more you want to talk about.
Yes. The second one is actually a part two. It's a phase two of a program that you actually all approved earlier in February, phase one of what we call the SBIRT program, excuse me, which stands for School-Based Screening, Brief Intervention, and Referral to Treatment Program. And as proposed, this is a 2-year program for a youth engagement pilot providing preventative screening and behavioral health services to Spokane County use only. And for phase one, we went with extending an existing contract with Spokane Public Schools, and you approved the schools for that one. And then this is the second phase where we needed to do an RFP to expand to phase two. And so we completed that RFP, and ESD 101 was selected as the awardee. And so with that, we needed to identify the school districts that we wanted to expand to. And so likewise, I'm going to turn the time over to Justin. He carried out the RFP. He's been working with ESD 101 on the options of the different school districts that they recommend, because the schools have to be welcoming and ready for this as well too, this type of program. And so I'm going to turn it over to Justin to explain the current status of phase one and where we're at with phase two. And again, with your approval, this would also, the contract for it would be on your docket on November 29th if you approve. Justin, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you, Kathleen. So based upon the approval of the school-based project in February last year, this year, we moved forward with the schools. Now, there has been a slight delay. You know, schools are off during the summer, and then workforce is a challenge. So part of the initial phase one and phase two was in conjunction with school districts and implementation. So we had to work with them, which is why you're seeing them come out at the same time, but kind of overlap. So this is just a continuation of that additional project. Phase one is actually tomorrow going to provide its first screenings in Centennial Middle School and the West Valley High School. So they're doing those. The schools are excited. We had to train everybody, and that took an extensive amount of time because the schools wanted everyone trained. They were very excited about it. And then they put notices out to parents, which require 2 weeks preparation to notify parents prior to this going in. All the parents expressed a desire to want this to be even more extensive. So they're asking for more. And of course, we have very little staff available for that. So we said, hey, this is a pilot. So that part's exciting. And then the school identified, with parents' involvement, 25 students prior to the screening going into effect. So what we have is everyone wanting things to move forward, but really we're trying to have a structured approach. So by tomorrow and Wednesday, you'll see the first 2 screenings of an entire classroom. So they're going to hit 30 students all at once. We're going to bump the information back, and then we're going to do another classroom. We're just going to hit those rolling throughout the 10th grade, and then a 8th grade. So we're going to hit those classes and then have data provided for it. Phase 2 was in conjunction recognizing school districts, which is why you saw us choose ESD 101. We had to pick a school and or a ESD because those are the only ones that can implement within a school district and in partnership. And then as part of that, we had to identify 2 schools and the need. So what you'll see in the handout there is we asked ESD 101 to provide information on schools that they recommended for implementation, but we notified them that if we went forward with this, the board would then choose. Thinking back in February, Commissioner Kearns had expressed a desire to want to know what other schools in our region would be provided this, which is why we asked them to look at schools that had a highest degree of need, maybe more rural, and also identified that there isn't existing resources or support within there. So ESDs came back with 2 schools. They recommended placing 1 provider in Riverside and 1 in Freeman, and to begin screenings with those with that 1 provider in 1 of those schools to begin with. So either a middle school or the high school, again, determined upon which one the schools feel the greatest need is, and based on board approval. So that is the first one. The other aspect was the total school enrollment. We wanted to not overwhelm those providers, so total school enrollment in the district as part of the selection was under 7,000 students, so that there was an ability to be able to provide that engagement and treatment service at the same time doing the screening. So this is similar to a model that was done in King County, but we do it better. We are not only doing the screenings, we are doing the treatment and providing that gap area, which is something that I've routinely told King County that we're doing it better, and they recognize that. So what's cool about this is we don't want to overwhelm them, but they're getting treatment. So you'll see on that, the Riverside School, Freeman District. I will pause there before moving forward for any questions.
Any questions?
And if I could just mention, which I failed to mention at the beginning, this is funded with mental health sales tax, this entire pilot, both phase 1 and phase 2, and estimated to be between $500,000 and $600,000 annually going forward. And we initially, right now, are just looking at a 2-year time frame on it to make sure that we have good results from it, as well as to ensure we have continued funding for it. But I did want to make sure that you are aware this is coming from mental health sales tax, which is a reason why there's not a lot of different regions throughout the state with this type of program. King County also has their administrative service organization also has mental health sales tax combined with it for use of programs. And so being a lot like that, we wanted to take advantage of this because we know how important the youth and getting services into the schools is to the commissioners. So, but I just wanted to make sure you knew this was with mental health sales tax.
Yeah, thank you, Kathleen. I appreciate that. Because as we know, there's been discussions in the community about, youth and students with mental health, that they feel it's a mental health crisis. And so this is, our department here looking at what was going on, what was happening and being proactive in that, because as we know, these programs don't just start. So I think you started looking at this, 2 years ago when the pandemic first hit, as to what could happen and what could help. And so I appreciate your forethought and your tenacity to make this happen. And, I think this is one of the ways that we are going to help look at what the needs are for our youth in Spokane County.
Yes, I totally agree.
And then just to be clear, the first pilot is with West Valley School District. So that's where they're at the middle school and the high school at West Valley.
So just want to make sure that there are no concerns with our recommendation to, as we've worked with ESD 101, to select Riverside School District and Freeman School District. Are there any concerns with that?
It doesn't look like it.
Great. Because we will specify that in the contract when we go forward.
Okay. No, and I'll be anxious with West Valley if they're starting their screening tomorrow, how that goes, because I know talking to the superintendent, they're very excited. So.
Yes, actually, as we were talking, I just got a notice from my staff who's on site. Today is the day they're doing the high school. Tomorrow they're doing the middle school, and they just completed the first screening. All the students were excited. They wanted to stay out for longer. So what we found is that the community's response to this already has been overwhelming. The school's already talking about seeing if they could find funding to make this more permanent. So what we found is overwhelming support so far.
Great. Thank you. I think it's exciting.
All right. Thank you, commissioners. Again, we'll make sure these contracts are on the November 29th docket for your approval then.
Okay. Is there a reason why we're waiting until November 29th?
Well, we're trying to get all the schedule and have to get the contract finalized and ready to go, and then out to the entities and back with signature for your approval. So it just takes a little bit of time. So that'll be the next time that it will work.
Okay. Well, if it can get on sooner, we're always happy to take it sooner.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I guess the sheriff,
And he will be on his way over.
is he on his way over? Do we want to take just a?
Yep.
Yes, you're ready for break?
Yeah,
Oh,
no, I
said
just,
that
you
was
said
something
thank you, and I
else.
said, yeah. Yes.
Do we want to just take a 5 or 10 minute break?
Sure.
Okay, let's just do 5, and hopefully Ozzy will be over here by, we'll come back at 10:40. So we'll just take a 5-minute break. And next, there we go. Okay, welcome back. We extended for 5 minutes on our break for everybody, and we are back now, and we have Sheriff Ozzy Knowles here to talk about a proclamation for emergency request.
Thank you, Commissioners. As you know, there is a camp that's been established within the city limits, and there's been much discussion and much debate about what to do with this camp. This camp has been effectively in operation for the last 10 months, moving into 11 months. The weather is changing, and there are certain concerns for the health and safety of the residents of the camp due to the weather changing. You have a community that is quite frankly being destroyed by the elements of that camp. I've spent time talking to residents. I've spent time talking with the business owners. You have businesses that are about ready to close shop. And if one of those businesses, i.e. being Fred Meyer, were to close, that community loses its largest grocery store within walking distance. This is a severely marginalized community. And there doesn't seem to be any urgency to help that community out, nor any urgency to help the people within the camp. There's been a lot of talk about all the wonderful things going on at the camp right now. It's amazing they didn't start until we said we were going to close that camp. This is not humane. This is not compassion to have people living in those conditions. The city of Spokane has requested that we stand up with the EOC. The EOC is very important for us to be able to coordinate resources, to be able to order resources in a very quick time frame. We have reached out to the business community, and we have asked them to engage and help with certain funding of things that we need to do to comply with the 4 things that the state said we had to comply with before they would consider a timeline on this camp. And that would be 1, offer shelter space and services to those displaced individuals residing in the encampment. Well, we're working towards that. As a matter of fact, there's been a lot of community outreach. In the last 10 days, we have come up with a very viable plan that if we are able to accomplish it, another 120 beds come online in this community December 1. And we have agreements from several providers to help work towards that December 1 date. We're still waiting for the state of Washington to decide if they're going to come on board and help us with that and commit to that date. When the local providers, the local government, and local businesses and residents can see the value of a plan, I don't see where it's the state's responsibility or that they have the authority to tell us no if we take care of the things that they have outlined here. The second being, develop a plan to securely store the personal property of those at the encampment. That's easy. and we're working towards that right now. That's why the EOC is critical for us to get stood up so we can rapidly get these two things in motion and in place. Third, provide for safety and security for people on site or providing the displaced individuals with assessments for services and housing. And those work crews working to clear the encampment. We have a plan to deal with that. The city's on board with that plan. And we're moving forward with that. The fourth, I would argue, is really Wausau's to accomplish. And that would be restoration and cleanup of the property. I don't see that where that's our concern. It's their property. They have allowed this to happen. I would say that that would be their responsibility. But in the spirit of cooperation, we can even help with that plan. Those are the four things the state said that we have to accomplish in order for them to agree. We're ready, and we have a game plan. That game plan, again, is acceptable to our providers, to the city. The board chair has been briefed. She seems to think it's logical. So that is why we are coming before you to open the EOC is I need the structure to coordinate the resources, the assets, and implement this so we can, with the chief goal, and this was stated at our very first planning session, the chief goal is to have this resolved without ever having to use any law enforcement tactics. This can all be taken care of and have people moved out very rapidly. This doesn't have to take 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 months. Our community is much stronger and much better than that. And we can provide the people residing in that camp with clean, safe living conditions, something they do not have at this current time. Any questions, board?
So I'll just say I was in a meeting with Ozzy.
We meet.
Tuesday. I know. Like, my
They all
days are-
blur.
My days are not blurred. So that was part of the discussion was, how do we bring everybody together to have these conversations and have it be transparent so the public can see? And so having the Emergency Operations Center allows for that to bring everybody together into one room, have a set meeting cadence, similar to what we did with COVID, where we met every morning and then stepped it back, because this is important. As we know from the National Weather Service, we heard it today from the airport, this is going to be our third year of a La Nina, which means colder, wetter winter. This isn't going to be okay for these people to be out there, in the cold and wet. And seeing this weekend, some of you know I had a service that I was at Gradeside Service Friday, and it was freezing. It was raining hard. We were standing there. It was windy. We had a tent covering us, and we were freezing. That's where I just feel that this isn't okay for these people to be there. Having just gone to Houston with the mayors, bringing them into, if it's Trent, expanding the capacity, bringing them in as a group, which is their community right now, is something that I think we can do. And it's none of these plans are, I don't know if they're baked or not, but that's what we need to talk about as a group and really do this, compassionately. But as I learned in Houston, it's as they take encampments and bring them into these navigation centers, which is really an emergency shelter. They call it a navigation center. We can call it a navigation center because we really want to help them get the services they need and to get into the housing that the state wants them to get into. But you can't just do it overnight, and having them stay out in the cold, I don't think is going to be healthy for anybody. And I'm concerned if everyone's going to start to have little, fire pits or propane tanks, which we know is probably going to happen. With the fencing now, it's a health risk. I just don't want to see people, if there's a fire, for them to try to get out is going to be hard. So, I think having the EOC stood up, which the proclamation just allows for that to be stood up, so that then too, as we look to the things that we need to purchase, we can purchase them quickly, and not be going through months of procurement process that we know we would normally have to do if it's not an emergency. I think because of the winter, that it's called for. So, Mark?
And I wanted to just mention to the sheriff briefly, and we can discuss this more fully in executive session, but it sounds like you're having better success communicating with Washington State Department of Transportation. We get word back through their Attorney General's office that the only way they're willing to discuss this is if we dismiss the case that we have pending. So we'll discuss this more fully, but I don't know if you should just continue to lead the charge there or not.
Here's what the discussions are at right now. We don't have contact with WASDOT. We've invited them to the table. We've invited all the state agencies to the table. I sent an email to the Commerce Secretary, the Chief of WSP, and the Director of WASDOT Friday. To this date, I have not heard back from them in any form of communication. There are key providers in the area that are having back-channel conversations with the state, trying to get them to come on board and help for a rapid resolution to a situation. And we can talk about the rest of it in executive session, but Mark, the state has not reached out officially. There's a lot of back-channel conversation going on. A lot of it is really positive, but the proof will be in the pudding come, I believe, Thursday, if we actually can get them to the table or if they do not come to the table. That's really, I say Thursday is going to be a critical set of meetings that are coming up within the community. And if we cannot get the state to come on board, then we have a responsibility to the citizens of our community to deal with this issue.
Todd, do you have a?
Yes, so the sheriff's described to you the desire to stand up the Emergency Operations Center for the purpose of transitioning the occupants of Camp Hope to a navigation center that's really geared for dealing with their immediate and ongoing needs. The other part that goes hand in hand with setting up the EOC is also approving a proclamation of emergency. This is something that, for those of you who recall COVID, every time that we declare an emergency, we typically ask for a proclamation to go with that to allow us the ability to respond to that. And so just very quickly, that whole proclamation falls under RCW 3852010. It describes an emergency or a disaster. It talks about that as an event or set of circumstances which demands immediate action to preserve public health, to protect life, to protect public property, or to provide relief to any stricken community overtaken by such occurrences. I think you have most of those in play here with regard to this camp. And the emergency declaration, as Commissioner Cooney pointed out, does allow us to go forward. It allows us to enter into contracts and incur expenditures necessary to deal with the emergency. It allows us to be nimble in our approach so that we can meet some very time-sensitive deadlines.
So at that point, I am declaring this an emergency for this community.
So I think the effort to declare the emergency is appropriate and timely. We stood side by side when we did this for COVID, and it gave us the flexibility to respond to changing dynamics and do it in a much more timely fashion and stuff. But I think that all three of us are fully committed to standing with you to make sure that we can take care of this. And as I talk to citizens out in the community, one of the things that I hear most about, other than frustration with public safety, That's not you, that's the state and some of the other dynamics that are going on that I know that you and the board are trying to address. But the homelessness issue is an embarrassment to the community. A lot of people are frustrated at the lack of leadership that has taken it to get us to where we're at, and are very appreciative of the leadership that not only you provide, but also that the board provides in trying to address this in a timely fashion, especially as you and the chair have indicated, it's getting cold at night. And the last thing we want to do is have people that are vulnerable be subjected to bad weather conditions and stuff. So I fully support your effort to declare the emergency proclamation, and let's see if we can get Spokane back to what it used to be and not what it is right now, because I don't think any of us are proud of what we have going on right there. And so, thank you.
Do you have a physical location identified for the EOC? I know, for COVID, it was the fire training center, but.
It will eventually transition to the fire training center.
Okay.
Right now, that facility is being used for some training.
Okay.
It's pre-scheduled. We'll start out in DEM, then transition to that building.
Thank you.
And so if the proclamation goes forward tomorrow, because we've got time till tomorrow, then when would you set up the EOC?
We have a meeting scheduled, which you'll all be getting an invite to for 8:30 tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning.
Okay, and I guess I'm just asking for clarification for people listening is, with the EOC, that is bringing everybody to the table. So that way everybody can be part of the conversation and help with find the solution.
It is the hope I can tell you that the city of Spokane and the county team are resolute in bringing this to a resolution. Our hope is that by standing up the EOC, we will be able to get organizations like Empire Health to come to the table and help us with the goal of this transition and to the date that we've been in negotiations with. That would be December 1. However, that's going to be up to the state because Empire Health is a contractor for the state. If the state doesn't want to come to the table, they may not allow the contractor to come to the table. So my concern is that, yes, Commissioner, the goal is to bring everybody to the table. My concern is I don't know if we want to get the state to the table.
Is that because of the action that's before the courts on November 10th?
No, I think that's a red herring, truly, because as Mark can tell you, parties in these type of actions have the ability to sit and meet and discuss before we ever get to the action. The state has taken the stance that they're just not going to do that if there's any potential, but at the same time, we have an obligation to get this resolved, and Mark his team has a job to do. It truly is a red herring. The state, if they truly want, can come to the table, they can talk about this, and we could get this resolved and never have to go to court.
Are there any other questions? Mr. French?
So if you're going to take an action tomorrow morning at 8:30 to stand up the EOC, does that mean that we have to declare the emergency proclamation today? Or is it okay to be able to do it tomorrow afternoon? Okay, I just want to make sure from a coordination standpoint, we're fully aligned and supporting you in terms of what you're doing.
I think that by you taking the briefing and have it on the agenda to pass, it gives me leeway to be able to set up and start getting things moving and just wait for your resolution.
And then will you be available tomorrow at 2:00 to speak to the proclamation one more time for the public? I think we can take it, just as let you speak to it, because then if you have had the meeting Tuesday morning, we'll know more. Can be, because I think it's important that we are transparent with the public, that we are not trying to do harm to anybody. I mean, we really are trying to be compassionate. I just, like I said, seeing how cold and wet it was this on Friday and how the weekend is going, it's just, I'm concerned.
I'm concerned that our compassion has now reached the point where it's becoming enabling. And at some point, you just have to take an action. And so I see that as where we're at.
Just simply looking at the reports of what is happening there. I mean, for months, what's happening, and then couple that with the weather that we're coming into. Compassion isn't leaving people out at Camp Hope. I mean, that's not compassion at all. But
compassion is getting them the proper help that they need. Compassion is getting them safe, clean living environments. That's what compassion is. That is not compassion.
So will you, as you stand up the EOC, ensure that the health district?
We will. They are being invited to come to the EOC meetings. They are being engaged.
I'm sure you've got a whole list of people, but as chair of the health board, I just want to make sure that we have our health officer there as well.
I have the invite list developed. I just need to hit send.
so from a logistics standpoint, from as far as we're concerned, should we, our afternoon 2:00 meeting today, should we continue that to tomorrow so the three of us can attend that meeting? Since we're within 24 hours, we wouldn't be able to notice that 8:30 meeting. So we'd have to continue either this morning's meeting or our afternoon meeting to tomorrow. Is that correct?
Yeah, it might be better to continue this one because your afternoon meeting is a special meeting.
Oh, okay.
And the 8:30 meeting tomorrow is going to be where?
It'll be over at DM.
Thank you.
And the 8:30 will be prior to you taking action on the declaration or proclamation of emergency. So otherwise, I think there might be a little bit more latitude on being able to meet, but that's a call of the attorneys.
Yeah.
I think we're fine if we meet
Monday. Can continue. Yeah. Okay, very good. Thank you for coming. And then, yes, if you see at 8:30 tomorrow, but then 2:00 if you'd be at the 2:00 meeting to present.
Mark, did you need me for the exec?
You're welcome to be here for the
Yes.
exec. I know what your position is, so I don't think, unless it's going to change. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Sure. Okay, so with that, then, Scott.
I do not have any miscellaneous, commissioners.
Okay, so we have executive sessions.
You do. You have there, you're right, you got there. The opioid litigation will be one. That'll take 5 minutes. Camp Hope will be 10 minutes. Kalispell Tribe will be.
And when we're talking about litigation.
All of these are under pending litigation, yes, thank you. Bob Riviera, Bidwell Park, will be 5 minutes. And we need 10 minutes for the Kalispell matter. And I understand we want 5 minutes under real estate for another matter.
You can push mine to tomorrow because I've got a hard stop at 11:30. So I'll stay here for as long as I can.
Okay.
Oh, and one for State of Washington versus, Schnaza versus state.
Okay.
That'll be 5 minutes.
So how many?
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And the fifth one is 5 minutes.
Yes.
So we've got 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 35 minutes total. That's what we anticipate.
I've got 20 minutes. So
And you've got 20 minutes.
Yes, if we need to make it at 20, I'll just talk fast.
Well, no, I just skip out and I'll catch up to you.
All right.
I know where you work.
And no action anticipated. In terms of who we want in it, it'll be the executive management team and your legal team, me, for your legal team. Sheriff is going to join us for the Camp Hope one. We already know his position.
Okay, so we are going into executive session for the items just stated with our 3 commissioners, our executive management team, and our legal team. We anticipate to be in executive session for a total of 35 minutes. No action be taken.
No, we anticipate no action.
Okay. Although after the 35 minutes is over, we will be continuing this meeting to tomorrow morning at 8:30 to meet with Ozzy with the future Emergency Operations Center, which will be over at our DEM conference room. Did I say on the right?
Sounds great.
Okay, there we go. So thank you all very much, and I don't know that we're set up to record over there. Gotta figure all that out.
Just have to have a handheld recorder phone line, right? You have someone to call in.
So people have to be able to.
Yeah, people have to be able to call in.
Sure, they'll have something.
Yeah. Use the owl thing too. So, okay, so we'll figure that out. Thank you all very much, and we'll continue this to, after our 35 minutes of executive session, we'll continue this meeting to 8:30 tomorrow morning. Okay, thank you and welcome back. We are back from our executive session that ended at 11:47. With that, then, we talked about continuing the meeting to tomorrow morning. You're not going to continue the meeting at this point. There will only be 1 commissioner in attendance. And so we will be concluding this meeting, correct, at this point? Just double check with our legal, that we will be concluding the meeting today. At this point in time, no decisions were made as we came out of executive session. And again, we will not be continuing this meeting to tomorrow morning at 8:30. We are stopping the meeting now. And then we will come back today at 2 o'clock for our working session meeting on our budget. So we will see everybody back at 2 o'clock. Thank you.